Okay, I've put it on live, Joseph.
Sweet! Home
Doing it live.
Alabama!
We're only 7 minutes late. I'm sure no one noticed.
They're like, where is the podcast?
Gone.
Why are they late like usual?
We should
Right?
We should work on that at some point.
That's my
No,
brand.
it's kind of our shtick.
Our shtick that we're always late.
Yeah, it's part of our
Does that mean we're
charm.
pregnant?
What?
You're late, you're pregnant, right?
I'm starting the music. Actually, I can't start the music till I have the volume up. This is the Player 4 Podcast. Join us each week as we talk about video games, entertainment, and pop culture, and bring in guests from the Rooster Teeth community. Player 4 has entered the game. Hello and welcome to the Player 4 Podcast. I'm your host, Tristan, aka Shagrazier.
I'm Alex, aka Chaos Black 21.
I'm Malachi, aka Suki Kiba.
And I'm Joseph, aka J Dunlap on the Rooster Teeth site, which is now inundated with spammers.
Uh-oh. Inundated. What?
Yeah, I actually tweeted about it last week.
Yeah,
I went
saw
to my
it.
profile and it said, has followed you, has followed you, has followed you, has followed you. I
I've
clicked
gotten
on
that
one,
too.
and their profile was a link.
Sweet. So that's great. I hadn't checked in a while. That's good to know, though. All
Because,
right.
way back at in their first iteration or whatever, or the one that everybody loved, one of the reasons that they gave it up was because the bots kept getting made and they, for some reason, couldn't fix the problem. So, hey, let's make a new one. Let's have the same problem again.
Woo! Yay, same problems. Alright, we got a couple of topics up here for tonight. We wanted to give a couple of minutes for Alex to tell us about the Outer Worlds. And I thought we should catch up with Joseph in his busy life. He had some music and magic he wanted to talk about. And then Joseph wanted to get together and have us discuss our methods for some world building in our D&D games. And then I think we'll get the flip out of here. Sound good, guys?
I guess.
Yes. Okay.
I like how it's the only one who responded. So, yeah.
This is tacit agreement.
Okay. So, are we starting with Outer Worlds?
Yes.
Outer Worlds. It's a great game. It's Fallout in space.
It's
That
Fallout
was
in
the-
space.
That was the general.
In space!
Yeah, so it is like Fallout with the whole RPG setup, and the dialogue, the way the dialogue options are, and the combat. They even have something like VATS, where in VATS you could actually slow down time, or basically stop time and choose where you wanted to hit somebody, an enemy, like whether you wanted to hit them in the arm or the head or the body or something. Outer Worlds has something similar to that called, I can't remember the actual name for it, but the abbreviation is TTD.
Which is
Or maybe
basically VATS.
maybe it's TDD. Maybe it's time distortion. It's like time distortion something.
I think it's TBD, to be decided who dies in this fight.
But so it doesn't actually stop time. It slows it really down a lot to a crawl, and so it lets you and you can still move around in it. That's another thing that's different from VATS. You're able to move around, so you can you can slow down time and decide maybe how you want to attack a group of people, or you can slow it down so you can get like the perfect shot on their head. And I really enjoy it. I use it a lot because I'm like a sneak / like range sniper person. So I like to hit them from afar before I get up to them.
Yeah.
And so I'll use it, and I'll be able to just like pick off like 2 or 3 people before I actually have to like go into combat with them.
And how is combat handled once you enter it?
It feels like Fallout. Typical, like you got the enemies will run to cover and fire at you from out of cover. Enemies that have melee weapons will charge at you. You have you can have up to 2 companions that can help aid you, like, and fight with you, and they'll give you perks for both in combat and like helping you with other stuff like hacking or dialogue options or picking locks, that kind of stuff. So all that is also in Fallout with the whole sneaking and lockpicking and hacking and intimidating
and eating rat roaches,
and persuading people. They don't have rat roaches. They have sprats and mantisaurs, and yeah, they have a whole bunch of different.
Which are
creatures.
Basically just green rat roaches?
No, they're actually bigger and deadlier.
Oh. Scary rat roaches, huh?
I guess. They have an enemy called the Manta Queen that is one of the more difficult ones to kill. Unless you have a plasma weapon. Plasma weapons beat everything. Unless it's a robot, then you have to use shock damage.
I see. But it's real-time shooter combat, except for the time distortion booty call.
Yep. Yep, it is all real-time.
Is it a looter shooter?
No. You can... No, it is not. You can get, technically, like, better versions of weapons. Like, where I'm at in the game, I'm getting like some of the weapons are called like Mark II. It's like the same weapon that I've had, but like more power. Some of them like the next level versions are like Ultra. They pretty much just tack something on like at the end to say, hey, this is actually more powerful than the
Super
guns that you had before.
Mega Death Gun.
But they're really the same guns, and you can actually do what they call is tinkering, which you can do at a workbench, which is another thing like Fallout. And you can make your guns and armor more powerful, so your armor can take more hits and your weapons can do more damage. They have a system where your guns can wear down over time, so you have to repair them and use parts. It's pretty deep. Yeah.
And the NPCs and storylines?
I mean, I like the story so far. You're basically a person that was on a voyage called the Hope, and it got like pretty much got shut down, and so like everybody's in cryo because it was going to take like 70 years to like get to the Halcyon system, which is where you're from Earth, and you're going to the Halcyon system.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone's in cryo in there, and a scientist comes and finds you and basically pulls you out. He's not able to pull anybody else out because of the authorities. He's actually has a bounty on his head.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets you out, and he thaws you out, and then now your goal is trying to find a way to get everybody else that's in cryo on that ship like free, because you're like the last hope to save the Halcyon system, because the Halcyon system is overrun by corporations, and so the corporations have taken over, and it's kind of like before unions happened. So essentially, like, the corporations have all the power, and the people that work for the companies basically get screwed over and have terrible conditions. And so you're going around each world and trying to help everybody.
Cool. And so, does that game have like an endpoint, or is it an MMO?
It'll have an endpoint. There is a final mission, like at least in the story. I don't know if you are able to play then after the main mission or not. If not, they have multiple difficulties. So they got normal, hard, and then they have one supernova, which is supposed to be essentially hardcore, I guess.
Oh.
Yeah.
Flying recklessly into an exploding star, huh?
Yep.
Super difficult.
Yeah, so I give The Outer Worlds 2 thumbsticks up.
Alright. 2 thumbsticks up.
I thought they were drumsticks.
2 drumsticks up.
No, they were thumbsticks.
Someone was just thinking about food.
Maybe. I haven't eaten yet. But I don't know much about Fallout. It's one of those games I've never played, so I didn't have any input. Sorry.
It's okay. But yeah, it's made by one of the companies that made Fallout. So that's why there's such a similarity.
Gotcha.
Tippity tip tip tip.
That's me tipping. Alright, Joseph, catch me up. What has been going on in Josephtown?
I'll try to keep this somewhat brief because it really doesn't matter to the everyday listener what in the world is going on in my life unless they're, our friends. But I had an interesting week because for some reason this autumn or fall semester, depending on where in the world you are, for my university was at least 1, if not 2 weeks off from what it should have been. Our Thanksgiving break is the week before finals, is the exact, the weekend before finals. And our Christmas concerts are all in late November before Thanksgiving. Fall break was a solid 2 weeks after midterms or something like that, instead of being right at midterms. So it threw me off because I didn't realize that. So all my planning was off a little bit. And then the Homecoming musical was the first weekend of November. So it was all really awkward. So I got to play for Little Women the musical on the piano, and then helped with coordinating getting some of the instruments put together for the musical. I was not in charge of the music, but I helped facilitate the arranging of what 2 keyboards were going to play the string parts and how we were going to get all the parts covered, because the books were violin 1 and 2, viola, cello, and bass for the string parts, and there was only 2 keyboards, and no one had the time to then combine it into 2 parts. So all I did was just pay attention to where there was holes and then help fill those holes in. Then I played the piano. Gina actually played the flute and alto flute, so that was cool. Alto flute is like a fat, lower version of the flute. Tippity tip tip tip.
So you said your school schedule's behind. Is it because there's 6 days less between at least I know this is a problem for retail right now. This is what I've been hearing. There's 6 days difference between less this year than last year between Thanksgiving and Christmas.
It feels like that. I feel like typically Thanksgiving happens, then you get the week of prep before exams, and somehow we ended up a week off, at least at my school. I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know what the factors are for that. It was just really awkward. So I did the homecoming program. I also played for a choir concert on the piano. I've been playing for the primary choir of the university this year. We had a program last night, which was basically that same program, but with a few more pieces. And I don't know, something was weird about that performance. I don't know if it was the keyboard being out of tune, keyboard meaning the piano itself, or maybe the action on the keys was a bit, what's the word, sludgy, muddy, compared to what I'm used to. There was a note sticking on me. There was a very important note that was out of tune. Not like really bad, but if you're trained, you hear it. And I may have been sitting too close to the keyboard by a few inches, and that was throwing me off. And then my position in relation to the conductor was a little bit off, and everything was weird. So the first piece that I actually got to play in, I didn't really have the time mentally in a few of the parts to get my mind and therefore my hands where they needed to go. So I was like missing some stuff. But then once I got in the hang of things and I sort of scooched my chair back a little bit, the piano bench, just like an inch or two, started to get more comfortable. It was really weird. Never had a performance quite that weird before in recent memory. But we did that, and then we're gonna travel Sunday morning to somewhere, I don't know where. It wasn't on the syllabus, so I'm like scrambling to find a replacement piano player for my usual Sunday morning gig. And then I should be able to get back in time to be late to my D&D game. In time to be late. So that's going on at school. And also, I got accepted to work 2 Magic Fests as a Magic judge in the near future. Right. So there's that. What day is it? Today is... Yeah. So a week from Saturday, I'll be working a 5K in DFW area as a floor judge. 5K meaning $5,000 is the total prizes when you add them all together. That's all that means. But that's pretty high. Usually events are 1Ks, but this is a store that was like, hey, we want to run tournaments. And so they used radio voice and everything. And so they were advertising their tournament. They're like, we're going to do a 5K. And in the judge Slack for our region, we were talking in the L2 chat, because L2s tend to be head judges or higher, like L3s as well. And we were talking about they're going to run a 5K, but it's going to be a regular REL with no judges on staff. How are they going to do this? REL, rules enforcement level. And one of the judges, he's from Houston, who's been an area captain before Judge Academy did away with those. He said, I'm going to actually email them. So he emailed them, and he convinced them they not only needed to have a judge staff, they needed to run the 5K at competitive rules enforcement level, because you should not do an event with that high of a prize pool without having some sort of rules enforcement that matters, where there's consequences.
Yeah.
So then he posted on Judge Apps, which is where you go to get your jobs, that he was looking for judges, and he told me specifically, hey, I don't care if you do Judge Academy or not, please apply. So I applied. I'm going to be doing that with Brandon, my judge traveling buddy. That's a week from Saturday. Well, in December, a week or two after finals get over, I get to go to Oklahoma City and work all 3 days of Magic Fest Oklahoma City. So that's cool. I'm hoping I get to do some main event stuff, some Grand Prix judging.
The main event.
And then, yeah, I've been doing main event judging in 2 of the 3 Grand Prix that I've judged, the first one being last year when I was in L1. And then I also got accepted this past week for Magic Fest Austin. This is the first Magic Fest, well, the first Grand Prix in Austin in a very long time. So long ago that I don't remember the last one that happened, because I didn't go to it as a Magic player. I went to things in Houston, I went to things in DFW, but I didn't go to anything in Austin because there was nothing in Austin by the time, as a player, I was traveling to play. So this is kind of exciting that Austin's going to get some sort of event, and it's a Magic Fest, so that's neat. And I got accepted to work 2 days on that, and it's around Gina's birthday, so I told her, if our finances will work out, that I'll just break even on the event and bring the fam with me to sort of do a birthday weekend.
Ooh, Joseph,
So that's what's going on with. Yeah, that's what's going on with me lately. That's January when Austin happens, and that's around when school starts. So I'm just going to tell the dean, hey, I won't be here Friday. Oh no!
Just
oh no, Tristan's getting arrested.
Again. I don't know what it is. Something about the street I live on, and it's a narrow, short street in general. They just blare their sirens and go flying down it, and it's just like, there's parking on both sides. The lanes are barely wide enough. What are they doing?
That reminds me of a thing that happened in the Magic judging world. There are two judges that are a couple that are both L3s, and one of them was the regional coordinator for their area, for their part of the U.S., and then the other one actually took the role just because she was the qualified person to take the role when he stepped down.
Mm-hmm.
And they recently had to move because they lived in a crappy neighborhood, and there were bullet holes on the side of their house one morning because they had heard shooting outside, and then there were bullet holes in the side of their house. And then about a week later or less, and this was not too long ago, they heard the shooting, and then like bullets went through their wall of their house.
Okay,
like either people had like stormtrooper level aim, or they were getting targeted, and they weren't sure which, so they did a GoFundMe and moved. That's just crazy. Anyway,
that is, yeah, that's nuts. It's always scary.
Yeah, no, there really aren't. Weapon discharges are very infrequent in Boston and Cambridge. In all of Massachusetts, it's we've got the gun control around here is pretty decent, so it's not often, or at least the times that like there are discharges or like drive-bys or anything like that, they're pretty localized to very specific areas, and you go, "Yup, that's that place." Of course,
I know mine are.
So, right. You caught us up. We did some of that. So, you wanted to talk about some world building, Joseph?
Yeah, I had this idea because you were asking about my D&D game, and I thought, well, not much of note has happened, but we could talk about D&D, and I like our discussions where we talk more specifically about the nature of running a D&D game. So I thought today, in our last few moments, we could each do like elevator pitch, the 3-minute overview of the essence of the worlds that we've both created for our D&D groups in the years that we've been running games, and then more to the point, what our methods were for world building. And sometimes a world could be built over multiple methods, just whatever is needed. So who wants to go first? Me, Tristan? I don't know if Malachi or Alex have anything they want to add as well, but they're welcome to.
No, I don't have anything.
I don't have anything outrageous. Things are kind of interesting right now, but
There's something unoutrageous.
all in due time. Not count my chickens before they hatch.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about it. Tristan, I want to let you go second because you've been doing this for a while and streaming on our stuff, and you are kind of a newer DM, not really anymore. And so I'd like to sort of contrast with my older way of doing things what your newer way of doing things is.
Oh, all right.
Because I started DMing during college, and what happened was I became interested in D&D because the local Hastings, which is a thing that doesn't exist anymore, it's a book and game and movie store, and you also rent movies Blockbuster style. They had D&D for dummies, and it was 3.5. So I checked it out, and I started reading and went, I want to play some D&D. And I've told you the story about pooping in a cave and getting killed by goblins before.
Yeah, I seem to recall that one.
That was my first session, and then nothing happened for years afterwards. So I bought the Player's Handbook for 3.5, and I notified some people I knew who wanted to play D&D, and then made some connections through some other people oh yeah, my coworker and his wife want to play, and so forth, and got a group together. And I said, I guess I'm DMing this. Okay. So my approach to world building at the beginning was, I need a place. Okay, here's what it's called, and I'm going to put it on the map right now. So when I started the group, I said, okay, why don't we introduce each character individually?
All
So I
right.
met with each player individually, starting with Gina. She was my first D&D session as a DM, and I named the village she was in. I named the next one she traveled to, and sort of had a general idea of what both of them were sort of like, both of those locations.
Yep.
Next player, we do a session, and based off of his background, he's from a forest, so I draw a forest nearby, and then he travels to a town, and I put that town on the map, and then gradually we've got a forest called the Great Forest, and we've got 3 towns nearby that are all connected by a road, and then it just keeps expanding from there, and then eventually the campaign just sort of fizzles as they do. Then I start a new campaign, and this one is at a school for adventurers, so I've got to figure out where that's going to go. And now I've got 2 areas in the same region. There's 2 provinces, essentially, with their own governing bodies that are next to each other. And gradually, it's a combination of players' backstories needing a place to exist versus something in the campaign needing for a place to exist, that gradually the world expands and expands, but it's still not fleshed out because it doesn't need to be. And that was 10 years ago or more when that happened. So that's where my world is at now, is I've got a primary region, and I've got another region where a full campaign existed, and I've got 2 other regions where players have traveled to for various storylines that they were going on, and then a relatively unexplored area that's only existed in player backstories.
Did you ever try working that Great Forest and its 3 towns back in so that they could be a part of this expanding world?
Oh yeah, that's an integral part of my world.
Okay.
Any druids are typically from that forest. Sometimes barbarians are as well. The towns tend to be places where you can find work, or it's the merchant route, because those towns connect all the way from a river to an ocean, and merchants will travel along that route, and sometimes they need muscle, so then players will get hired to be hired muscle for the merchants, or maybe some sort of storyline where they've got to travel along the road and track down where this one person is because they need to go get him because his uncle is dead and he needs to take over as a leader of a giant area. So, and even though he's been banished and he's on a ship's crew somewhere, they're trying to track down where he is while going town to town. So I go back to those places all the time. Like most of my stories happen in the same area.
Okay.
Overall.
I mean, that's not a bad way to do it at all. Like, it allows you to keep building the lore, and it allows you to know what you're talking about because you've been running it for so long. I feel a lot the same way, in my own way, in that I found when I was asked to DM another story in another world, and partly it was because it was not the world I'd written, partly it was because it was one of the official settings, which meant I had to do a lot of reading to figure out what was important about the official setting. It just I didn't have as much fun with it because I felt like I was really tied down to these things that I hadn't created. And so I felt like there were lots of things I didn't know, and I was constantly worried that I wasn't doing justice to the areas and the NPCs and the stories that were supposed to be told there, just because I was an outsider trying to run something that I'd never been involved in. You know, I wasn't a Forgotten Realms player.
It's interesting you say that, because when you've run games not in your own world, and then you have your own world and you run games in there's a stark difference between the two. And what I found, because I ran a whole, like, almost 2-year campaign in Star Wars, that it was cool sometimes to know the name of the place you were going. Say, I know that world. It was in this movie, or it was in this book. And usually one of my players would recognize the location, if not everyone, because we were in Coruscant at one point. But overall, knowing where you were going didn't matter nearly as much as the plot.
Right.
If you got to go to a place to explore some Jedi temples to do a thing and then fight a bad guy, it doesn't matter the name of that planet nearly as much as the setting itself and what you're there to do.
Yeah.
So you very well could have adapted it to your own world if you wanted to.
Indeed. You can do that. The reason I was constrained at the time was that there were a bunch of DMs supposedly working together to try and make an overarching world for several different campaigns full of players, so that there would be ability for crossover because they were all occurring concurrently in the same place.
I understand. I've done that before. There was a moment in time where I had my regular group meeting on a specific day of the week, and then I was saying, hey, I want to get some beginners together, and then there was like overlap of maybe 1 or 2 players, and the rest were people who were learning how to play. And as a result, they were meeting on a different day. I had it happening basically on the same timeline. It's like the same basic days happening concurrently. So then I connected the events to a point that the campaigns merged into a final session where everyone was in the same room together. And both groups had met up in this city working together to stop an evil that they had both become aware of. I had to keep track of it on like a little calendar sort of thing.
Yeah.
So Tristan, I would love to hear. I would love to hear about you started DMing, and we've talked about it many times on the podcast because people said, "Hey, we need a DM," and that's how it happens. And then you decided, "I'm going to build my world." What was your approach to it, and what does your world look like? Because I haven't really talked about what my world looks like, but I talked about my approach.
I will say, not terribly dissimilar from your own experience. When 5th edition first came out, and our 4th edition DM had moved away at this point, and I still had the other friends of mine who had been in the campaigns with her as DM, going, we're playing Shadowrun, we're having a good idea, but, it'd be nice to try out that new D&D edition. We had been playing D&D Next, waiting to see how this would shape 5th edition. And finally I said, okay, I'll try something, and when we got that first D&D Next book, the first draft of the Player's Handbook, I took that, and I just basically took a sheet of paper and I drew a shape. I said, this is going to be, I'm going to go as simple as I can for setting so that I can have as much leeway as possible with it. And so I said, I'm not going to worry about little islands and different continents and stuff. I'm going to do a supercontinent, so it is possible to go everywhere on foot, and I'm going to have all of the different biomes represented. There's going to be a tundra area, there's going to be a desert area, there's going to be an ocean, there's going to be a swamp, and there are going to be these large patches of the land mass that are all kind of segregated into their own country, as it were. And then I said each of these countries is going to have a different governmental setup, but they're all going to be self-sufficient. They're self-sufficient because the land areas covered by these nations was large enough to encompass any and all resources they would need to sustain themselves, which meant there wasn't a necessity for them to trade, and there also wasn't a necessity for them to go to war, except for expansionism, which does play a large role in this. All of the countries have everything they need to succeed and survive, but a lot of places just suffer that greed that humanoid races suffer, and try to expand into one another and take the others' land and resources, not that they actually need it. They just want it. And so I set up these kind of guidelines as my basic rules when I started designing it. And then for that D&D Next, I said, okay, these are going to be the different land areas. These are going to be the different biomes. There are a couple different governments. I set up just a few of each. And then I said, I'm going to focus on a short story in the Tundra one, because I had, that was way back, right when Skyrim was still pretty popular, just coming off of the popularity train. I was like, I want to do a Skyrim-like area. I'm going to set this place up very much like Skyrim in ESO, where the culture, the environment, and the things going on are very much like that. Or, inspired by, I should say. And then I set up a I set up the government, and I set up a short history of it, which, of course, culminated, it was a recently formed government from a war, and they do a party every year to celebrate the unification, which, of course, was a big, horrible war, but they call it the unification and act like it was a good thing. And I went from there and just said, all right, here's this place, here's a thing, a reason for people from other countries to all get together so you guys can be whoever you want, and then I'm going to introduce a conflict, and the conflict was during the celebration, somebody dies, and it becomes a murder mystery kind of thing, and that's what I ran as, like, a one-shot, short campaign, in that country that was Evangard, way back in the day, before 5th edition even came out. And then later, when I got asked to DM, that went okay. I ran it kind of like a shadow run, where I was just like, these are going to be kind of the stakes. This is going to be the way things are set up, and these are the flaming hoops you have to jump through to get the information you need to succeed. I then took that and adapted it once 5th edition was fully out, and I got these players, and said, okay, I started with that initial campaign where it was still the party bringing everybody together, the murder mystery as somebody gets attacked during the celebration, and then it expanded from there because suddenly there's a lot more players and there need to be more stakes, there needs to be more growth. I still only had up to the end of that kind of planned out. I knew that it was going to culminate in fighting the king's estranged sister who was trying to usurp his throne, but the way we got there when I started playing with my players 3 years ago was completely different from how the players got there when I first ran the one-shot in D&D Next. And that was cool. And then I got to the end of that, and I said, I don't know what happens next. Where do we go from here? And one of my players said, I want to be a paladin of vengeance. I need something to swear an oath of vengeance against. I want to swear an oath of vengeance against a dragon. I'm like, storyline.
And guess who that paladin was?
It was Malachi.
Dookie Kiba.
No, it wasn't!
It was Alex. Yeah.
I wouldn't stoop to be something so lame.
Oh.
Whoa.
But basically, so that was my basic method, Joseph, was I had a basic understanding of, how to create sufficient, self-sufficient economies, and I could have these self-sufficient economies cohabitating one place, which meant that they ever now and then would rub up against each other. And that's what I kind of focused on, was I looked at it from a socioeconomic perspective, and then I juxtaposed that. I stuck them into different biomes. The climates would change how the cultures developed, and I tried to focus on that. And I will say that I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from players from that, saying all the areas feel really different, the cultures feel really different, and all the NPCs are very enjoyable to interact with. And so that's been, something I've really enjoyed about it, and felt like, even though I've never done this before, I did manage to do that well.
I had a similar approach with trying to make sure that there were certain check boxes, Gotta have a tundra, a desert, and I've still not fleshed out my world to that extent that you did when you planned ahead, simply because I never had to. I figure at some point or another there might be a reason, either in a backstory or in a campaign, that we might need to know more specifics about this specific thing.
Yeah.
But it's more like a player says to me, I'm playing a dwarf, where am I from?
Right.
And I say, well, you've got two choices, and then sort of builds from there. If you're an elf, you actually have a lot of choices. There's tribal elves in the western area. They're combination of fighters, rangers, and druids. There's the not plains tribal elves, they're the forest tribal elves, so they're more traditional fantasy, and they've got more magic use. You've got the druids in the Great Forest, then you've got the elves of Grey Citadel, which is far to the west, beyond the mountains, in a society driven by money. And so I had someone whose backstory was he had grown up in the Grey Citadel. His father had lost their family fortune, so they were a disgraced family, so he left to find his own fortune. And so that's kind of how I go with it. It's not so much that we're going to go on a road trip, which I'm not saying that's what yours is, but it's not so much that my campaigns tend to be going on a road trip through all the areas, as much as it is, well, I guess I need to know more about Grey Citadel today because someone's backstory depends on it, or
and I think
we have yet to actually go there.
I think that's a great way to do
I've had
it.
at least... Mm-hmm.
Like, being
It's
able
just
to
whatever
focus
information
on,
you need.
right, being able to focus on one area and build the lore, build the flavor of that area is really cool. And so I'm always really happy when the players have a chance to stop and really start to take in the sights in one place. It gives me a chance to actually sit down and start fleshing out a city, a town, a countryside, whatever it is that they've stopped in and are interacting with for more than a day. You say you don't want to be mean and call it a road trip, but you know, my campaign has been very it moved a lot, and it moved a lot more than some other campaigns that I've played in. And this has been a double-edged sword. I love how much of the world they get to go and see, and how quickly they have to go, okay, we need to get from here to here. It's going to take us 3 days to travel there on foot, or if we, you know, take a boat, it'll take, you know, a day and a half. What do we want to do? What can we afford? And how do we go about doing it? But there's any number of different ways to play. I mean, hell, even if you look at, like, Critical Role in their first campaign a few years ago, the vast majority of the entire storyline occurred in one city. And they visited areas only slightly away from that city on a regular basis. They mostly stayed in one area and didn't start traveling around farther out and farther out until later in the campaign.
Those are some of the best ways to do it. The reason I didn't want to say road trip is because I liked your approach to your campaign, which was the entire point of it was to see all the sites. And I have done more of the Critical Role way of doing things, which is you've got a place that you call home, and then maybe your adventure sends you north on a ship. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe you go to a forest. Maybe it doesn't. Who knows?
And also, there's no wrong way to do it.
I had an entire campaign built around the School for Adventurers. And so they were there, and they were there more, and then they were still there, and then finally they graduated, and then they came back, and they got the band back together, you know. But eventually, you know, hey, I've got this thing. Now we have a reason to go to this place finally.
Yeah.
And in the Western campaign, that reason was they were working for a banker who said, "I own these 2 mines. Go check on them." So then they traveled basically a circle around the entire region.
And so then
anyway, yeah, it's really
in that area.
It's really cool to hear your approach and then compare to mine, which is actually extremely similar.
Yeah,
while also being different.
Yeah, I did actually want to point out one more similarity between the two, because you had said, well, I introduced the characters and this town got added to the map, and then I introduced this character and that town got added to the map, and you didn't know what was out there until they went and viewed it. And I want to say that maybe I'm pulling back the curtain a little too much for my players who are in the call, but like I said before, I mostly set up the world in terms of here's how the government functions, here's where their resources come from, and here's the climate that they live in. That was pretty much it. So then it's like, okay, I need to set up a story. Here's a story hook. It's going to be I come up with a city name and some stuff about that city. And once they do stuff there, or if it leads them out, like the players could choose to walk out of that city at any moment, then I have to go, okay, what's a logical distance for another town to be in? You know, is it going to be a day's walk, half a day's walk, 2 days walk? And then I have to say, okay, make up a name for that place, make up a quick little backstory for that place. I mean, that's how pretty much every city has been added to the map. I go, things being about a day's hike apart are sensible. So you go a day, and that you're traveling at such a rate that you find a town and you can stay in the inn there. You find another town after a day of traveling again. And I mean, that was the whole travel when they were trying to go, the chapter that you were a part of for a portion of, Joseph, when you were trying to stop the war from happening. That was pretty much, well, we know that we need to get to the capital of this country. We know that this road that we're on is going to take us there because the place is advanced enough to have a road that basically goes through all the major cities. And they basically hit city, you know, it was like a farming town, a hunting town, another farming town, and then a city, and then a city, and then the capital city. Anyway, they were all about a day's hike apart. And that was just kind of how it went. I'm just like, yeah, there's a city you can stay in. It's called Eldazon. Yeah, that's good.
But for
Tristram. It's not my name.
Tristram.
There was a town of Tristram. Do you remember it, Alex?
There was. There's also a town of Tristram in Diablo.
Yes, there is.
There's one more thing I want to add is one of the huge perks of doing it that way is you don't need to know things about the world that the players don't know. Not necessarily. There might be some secrets you want to keep from them, like, oh, this guy's secretly a dragon. That's been something I've done before. But if they get to experience the world as it quote unquote expands, which is the way that world exploration happens, it expands. The world becomes bigger and suddenly smaller. Then they can shape the world in some degree or another.
Yep.
I've got a thing in my world called the Morgan Special, which is a regional thing. It's a continental breakfast, eggs and toast. It's named after someone's character from a campaign 9 years ago, because he kept going to. They would stop in taverns and he would say, "Do you have eggs and toast?" And then they become heroes, and he's from the area, so he gets a breakfast named after him.
Gotcha.
Someone else founded his own town.
And that's a cool thing you can do. One thing I find hard to balance, one of those things I wanted to bring it up because it's one of the things you kind of do need to think ahead a little bit about, is building lore. And you can be a little sneaky with this by introducing a concept, leaving things vague enough that the players go after it, and then you can kind of build things as they tell the story. You can learn more things about your own lore as they go do things. It's just like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, this makes an interesting story, and add to it and add to it. And then by the time they get there, they've got years or decades or centuries worth of history on this thing that, you know, when you first introduced it as a concept, you were like, yeah, it's a MacGuffin.
Well, yeah. Sometimes it's just a matter of what's the best way that this story can unfold. I've had some really interesting stories unfold that way.
Yeah, and that dynamic system that you can use to increase or decrease the importance of different things, and increase and decrease the involvement of certain actors or players or NPCs into things is cool to kind of tweak the levers on and see how you can really get things flowing. And I love the ability to sit back and just let the players interact with things, and all I have to do is consider the NPC they're talking to and that NPC's motivations, and things that I might never have expected will happen. You know, there had been a negative side effect. They went and defeated a boss in a dungeon in one of my recent chapters, and there had been a major negative side effect where a player character had been brain blasted, basically, and stupefied. And that was going to be one of those things where the party first needed to identify what had happened, then identify how to fix it, and then identify where to get the resources to fix it. And it's one of those things that would, I think ultimately it might only have taken a couple days, but there was also another story element that I wanted to introduce around that time, and I had been planning that for months. And when that story element, which came in the form of an NPC, got there, his motivations, I wanted the players to solve the problem themselves, because I thought that would be interesting and maybe heroic feeling, and definitely a bit tedious. And there's always a place for tedium in campaigns. But this NPC got there, and I had to really look at his motivations, go, he has the resources and the drive to fix that problem because he has things that he wants from the party. And so the NPC ended up fixing that little tedious problem for them, so it didn't end up becoming that couple-day little side adventure of figuring out that tedious thing, because the NPC wanted something from them.
So what I'm liking here is we are well over time, but we've transitioned from world building to storytelling. Yeah. I would love to pick this up again next week and start talking about storytelling.
Fair. All right. Malachi, what are we doing?
Getting the flip out of here.
Getting the flip out of here.
We're going to yeet.
What are we yeeting? Who are we yeeting?
Fellow kids.
Who has been yacht?
All the yeets.
Hashtag.
There was a time in the campaign when Alex's character yote his daughter character.
He did, but it was to save her.
Yeah, and it was successful.
You didn't Kobe? Because I had players who Kobe'd a log off of a rope.
I did not spike it.
Didn't Tebow it either.
Good night, everyone.
Hashtag goodbye.
Good night.
Goodbye.
Did I tell the story about the bandits in the tree in the road?
The bandits in the tree in the road? Wait, is this your bandits and your tree in the road, or my bandits and my tree in the road?
My bandits and my tree in the road.
What happened with your bandits and your tree in the road?
So the players had not had a combat yet. And I thought, well, I'm going to give them a chance to do a combat if they want one. So I put a tree in a road, had highwaymen say, hey, yeah, you got to pay protections for this road. And they're escorting a merchant across the roads, you know, through the first region I ever built. And the paladin and fighter walk over, lift the tree, and throw it off the road. And the bandits just turn and walk away.
We don't want to mess with that.
So they see one of them later on their way back through the area in a town, and they like chase him through the alleyways, and he eventually, because he can't shake them, I'm not rolling very well, turns around and goes, what do you want? And they're like, yeah, you were one of the guys on the road. And he's like, you can't prove that. And then the paladin punches him, and right around that time he's been calling guards while looking them dead in the eye. guards, bandits, help, guards, they're waylaying me, guards, while staring the paladin in the eye. And the guards show up right as the paladin punches him because he's trying to get away. And the sheriff is like, you're gonna have to turn yourself in and come in for questioning. And since he's a paladin, he does.
Yeah.
But then he's like, yeah, it's the highwayman on the street on the road about a week ago. They were like, yeah, we heard about that, actually, and apparently the problem solved itself, so thanks for helping out with that.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
So it's just kind of funny. They still haven't actually killed anything, and they're like halfway through level 2.
Nice.
They're about to have to kill something because there's goblins involved, and they're going to collect a bounty to rescue a scouting party that has been trapped by goblins.
Ah. My party's...
Poor goblins.
My party's slowly tagging up to level 11 now.
Cool. We're doing party XP, and just to see if they like it, because if they don't, then we can switch to individual XP. Because in an individual XP, I've got a variant where instead of spending XP to make magical items, crafting anything gives you a small amount of XP.
Oh, that's right. You're using an older edition, not 5e.
Yeah, 3.5, you spend XP to make magical items.
Yes, you did. I just forget
but
that sometimes when we talk about it.
It's essentially, if you don't do party XP, I basically give XP for almost anything that you do that's of note. That advances your character. Like, we've got a dwarf fighter who wants to learn armor smithing, so he's got an apprenticeship right now before he levels up.
I see.
And we figured that we can have a lot of downtime moments in our campaign where they're just sort of living in the world and developing their crafts, as it were.